My name is John Steepleton. I am the founder of Cheyenne Mountain Civic Solutions in partnership with Joe Woodford and his Community Leadership Fund at the Pikes Peak Community Foundation. It's a pleasure to have you here today. I think we have a really interesting conversation that will play itself out. I want to thank Joe and the Community Leadership Fund for underwriting this research that Tom Binnings of Summit Economics did for this presentation. Cheyenne Mountain Civic Solutions and the Community Leadership Fund have done two community quality of life perception surveys, one in 2010 and one in 2012. Based on a survey that was originated here in 2002 by the Leadership Summit that United Way started in those days. And we decided it was good after a bit of a hiatus that we take a look at some of those original questions again, and so we did a couple of years worth. And I was in a conversation earlier with Tom about what we should do with that survey this year because its cycle had come around, and he recommended that it might be more interesting today to take a look at sort of a lot of research and sort of try to synthesize some new themes out of the existing research rather than doing a new survey this year, because there are so many things going on right now that lend themselves in different ways rather than the kind of survey that we had done. So that's what we chose to do. Tom observed a couple of days ago that I chose to use this language of who owns this community's civic parable, and I borrowed that actually from Rich Harwood and the Harwood Institute. It's Rich's, one of his mantras these days, that we have to be very careful about the stories we tell one another and the stories we tell those who are interested in life in Colorado Springs. And so we're going to explore that idea, but we're going to explore a number of other questions as well today, hopefully. And the origin of this, I think, for me, I think there's sort of two divergent ways of looking at how you get things done in communities. And when I left the Gazette years ago to start working sort of full-time in the philanthropic sector, and I was wading into some community issues, I had someone who had worked in community life for a long time relate to me that if you want to get something done in this town, you have to create a crisis and then things happen. Or the perception of crisis. And then later on, I went off to a national meeting of the American Red Cross when I was serving as the chairman of the board of that organization, and I heard something else that was, for me, more compelling. And there was a speaker there, was a motivational speaker who had been a photographer for many years of National Geographic, and he had sort of become a guru for leaders in a number of ways. And he spoke about finding the great photo. And out of his experience as a photographer, he came to this conclusion, that if you want to change life in your community for the better, you need to focus on what's right with the world so that you have energy and passion and capacity to address those things that are not working. It's not that you ignore those things, but you need to focus on what's right with the world. So here, there is a dichotomy, and I think we see it in different ways all the time in this community and others, that what is that story we tell? How do we think about what's really going on in our community? And how do we talk with one another, as well as how we tell our story through marketing and other means to the outside world, which has certainly been for a long time an issue for Colorado Springs. And we're blessed not only to have Tom Binnings of Summit Economics, who has been here a long time, starting with his days at CC, loves this community. He's been committed to it in many different ways for a very long time, and is still looking after all these years for the best way to make a real positive difference, and I greatly respect that.
I have to say, well, two things I want to start off with, just to kind of clarify the context that I'm presenting today. There has been discussion of my possibly running for mayor, and I'm here to say I'm not running for mayor. So this is not the beginning of a political agenda. The second thing is that this really, I have to think this is the most interesting title of a presentation that I've ever given, so I give John credit for that. Who Owns the Spring Civic Parable, which is really an exploration into who we are and what stories we should be telling ourselves and others about our community. So I had to go back and look up parable, and most of them deal with moralistic type issues and moralistic moral instruction. But I did find this in Wikipedia of all places, a succinct didactic story in prose or verse which illustrates one or more instructive lessons or principles. A parable is a type of analogy. So I'm going to give you a quick parable of my own that relates to my life, and I think Colorado Springs as well, because as an economist, especially in the last half decade or so, I've been the purveyor of more bad news than good news. And so, you know, my daughter is a third-year student at NYU Law School, and her dream job is to go work for a large law firm and pay off that huge debt that she has incurred to go to law school. And last year, in her second year of law school, the key is between your second and third year that you get a good associate position somewhere so that you can then hopefully be hired by that firm. Well, she didn't get that position last year, and of course you can imagine the personal crisis as well as family crisis that potentially created. And so I moved into my economist fatherly mode and said, okay, you know, let's look at the data, let's get assessment, what do you need to tweak, what do you need to do better, da 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 da. And she did a number of those things. But in the summertime, she looked at me, she said, you know, Dad, you're really shaking my self-confidence. And I go, oh, okay. So I backed off, said, okay, my role clearly is to be with unconditional love and supportive of whatever happens, and to privately say many prayers. So I did that, and 2 weeks ago she called on cloud nine, and she has a job with one of the most prestigious law firms in the world, based out of London. And so, you know, everybody, all just a collective sigh of release. But it applies to Colorado Springs or any community really, in that it's one thing to be realistic and to focus on the challenges that we face, but it's another thing to do so from the perspective of negativity or what's wrong with me. One thing we learned very early on in strategy and strategic planning is you should always plan around your strengths, and then you try to minimize or cover up the weaknesses as much as possible. And I think that her experience was a testimony to that and a good lesson for me. So then I went out and I looked at what's a civic parable. I'd never heard that term either. And of course, the only thing that came up on Google was the Hardwood Institute. And they have this civic parable that says it's about the U.S. winning over Ghana in, I guess it's the World Cup. But as an American, I was struck even more by the words and let me read off of here. More struck by the words used by the players, commentators, and others to describe the win. Grittiness, grinding it out, gutsy, and resolve. Such words not only reflect the U.S. team's play, but our national character. And so I think the question today and the challenge today is for us to begin the conversation about what is our community character and what words would we use. So the task I was before this, I began thinking about who does own our Civic Parable when this came out? And I made this list. It's not comprehensive. Certainly, you know, the local newspapers, and that's plural, are not on the list, and they could be added. They're in alphabetical order, so there's no preference given to anyone here. And I will let you read the list, but these are potential owners of the Civic Parable. And I guess I ask you to reflect for a second and think about, as you have traveled around the country, or you're up in Denver and you meet with friends and associates or whoever, family, what is the perception they have of Colorado Springs? And how do we play into that in our own narrative, in the own stories that we tell? So when I looked at this list and getting a little anxious about, well, how am I supposed to sort all this out? Then I asked my wife, so who owns the Civic Parable? And she said, you know, we all own the Parable. And I thought that was a great quote that ended my deliberation, so I went and jumped into the data. The Community and Quality of Life Survey that's presented, that has been done every other year pretty much since 2002, is our own version of one that we found parallels in some ways on a couple of data points. The National Citizen Survey, which is overseen by two entities, one out of Boulder, Colorado. And we differ from that in that they provide a proprietary comparison between communities with a primary focus on city and county services. So they're out there to get feedback on how do citizens feel about what we're doing locally. And when I saw that, actually, I was surprised that Colorado Springs and El Paso County don't do that. I'm a big believer in excellence in all we do in customer service, and it seems like that would be a good approach. That aside, we have our own survey, and we've gone out about it a little bit differently, tried to combine the two in a couple areas that you will see. The past sponsors of this survey have been a number of groups, and just a few, maybe there are more: United Way, Cheyenne Mountain Civic Solutions, El Pomar, the Gazette, Community Leadership Fund, and Leadership Pikes Peak. If I've missed any, please let us know. So here's the first set of data, and I'm just kind of going to give you the highlights, but at the very top, you see by year, the Pikes Peak region has consistently hit around 90% of respondents to, and this is a scientifically valid survey, I think it's plus or minus 4% in the survey, the phone work that they do, have constantly said that we have a good or excellent quality of life in this community. Well, the first question I ask is, well, that sounds great, but is it really? How does that compare with other communities? And so we got a little bit of data from Suwanee, Georgia, where they had 3 surveys, and they were hitting 95, 97%, and they were in the 90th to 97th percentile on that scale with the same question. So that says, all right, we're somewhere at the higher end. And then we went out and we collected a bunch of other cities who responded to this same question. And the other average on the bottom there, they basically are hitting about 80%. So on average, around the country, people respond that about 80% of the people respond that their community offers a good to excellent quality of life, which is, I think, a very positive thing. So I would estimate that we're somewhere in the top fifth. So we're in the top quartile or top quintile in terms of how Colorado Springs rates with our quality of life. Now, if you notice, Lafayette, Colorado and Windsor, Colorado are also there, and they are roughly the same level of response, high quality of life that we responded to. And so maybe our quality of life is more Colorado related and not specific to Colorado Springs. And as you can see, I'm going to give you data. I am not going to answer the parable or answer the question, and that will be for our panelists to hopefully weigh in on, and everyone as you as well. We are videotaping this today because we want to put it on a website and have people be able to look at it, view what's being said here today, and also weigh in. So we see this as the beginning of a broader community conversation. Another metric where we're able to get other city data was in terms of safety, how safe people feel walking in their neighborhood at night. Colorado Springs is in the low 80% there, which is about the national average, at least from the data that we could find. And interestingly, Lafayette and Windsor are significantly above us in that average, or in terms of how people feel in those communities. So clearly, it's something else that is impacting our quality of life other than just safety. Some other miscellaneous trends that we kind of pulled out of the Community and Quality of Life Survey include how our local economy compares to the national economy. So one might think that if we have a great economy locally and people feel good about our economy relative to the national economy, then we would have a higher quality of life. Well, that's not necessarily the case either, where less than 50% of respondents consistently say that our economy is not better or much better than the national economy. An interesting was, in that blue band, the percent that attended a public meeting of community affairs in the last year. And we're hitting about a third, consistently, about a third of the residents in El Paso and Teller County attend a meeting for public affairs. And I was very pleased to find that in San Francisco, that same question only results in 12%. In all of California, it's only 9%. So it's like, well, maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something about community engagement in our political affairs that can, on the one hand, drive us crazy, but on the other hand, give us a good sense of quality of life. A couple of other items, just, the biggest environmental challenge, we know water supply is consistently our greatest challenge. And then a large percentage, almost everybody, says parks, rec, trails, and open space are essential to the community, and 80% arts and culture improve the quality of life. And so we didn't have comparative data, but I'm not so sure that would be that much higher than other locations. So I think we're probably on par there. So that's about all we could really find in the community survey itself, so we went out and looked for other sources. And the first one we found, Gallup does both locally, community-wide, state, and national. They do this globally, do a survey on well-being index is what they call it. And the elements of the well-being index are life evaluation, emotional health, work environment, physical health, healthy behaviors, and basic access to necessities, I believe that is what that is. And you can see that in Colorado over time, over the period that we have up here, is consistent. Well, first of all, the overall rating, we're in the top 20%. So we're in the top 10 states out of 50. And in terms of, especially in physical health and healthy behaviors, we rank very highly, but we do extremely well in virtually all of them. Looking at Colorado Springs, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a map that shows the 5th Congressional District is blue. It's in the second quintile in terms of the well-being index produced by Gallup. And Colorado Springs, typically we're in the second quintile. We make it to the top of the first quintile, the top 20% every now and then. So we are somewhere in, according to this data, in the top, definitely in the top 40% consistently in terms of well-being. And if you look at the factors on the bottom right-hand scale, we score high along with the rest of the state in our physical health. But that red box there does concern me, as an economist, of course, that in terms of workplace environment or work environment, we are in the bottom quintile. Now, interestingly, as I did more research into that, that's not because of our current economic predicament that we face. That's how people respond about their work environment where they work, which even raises more questions, right? And so the response is that relative to all of the other communities, over 250,000 people in North America, we're not doing well in the workplace. So going further, how Gallup comes up with this index, they did some research globally and tried to correlate how people respond to different elements and how that translates into how they respond to their overall well-being. And here we see that in terms of, and they defined it by looking at what they call the thriving gap. So they looked at people who said, I'm doing very well, or great well-being, overall quality of life. And then they said, well, how are you doing on instance, are you more likely to be satisfied with your personal health? And people who are more likely have a higher well-being, as self-reported. Or they're more likely to be satisfied with their standard of living, their material well-being, more likely to have friends and connections that they can count on, and they have a higher education level. And those factors are the dominant factors in overall well-being when correlated globally. Probably as we think about this, it's like, well, that kind of makes sense. Less so are environmental conditions, personal voice and governance. That was an interesting one. People who have a high well-being are less likely to be afraid to openly express political views. And that we generally think that applying to foreign countries. And then the other two relatively minor ones are personal activities and physical insecurity, which is that question, how safe do you feel in your neighborhood? So I tried to come up with an index. So this is a first stab at an index and how we changed from 2000 to 2012. And our index declined in terms of our well-being, the best I could surmise from Gallup's data. And in doing so, it declined, but if you look at the major factor that gave it the decline, it's the healthcare cost. And so that's a national factor. And as people become more anxious and more concerned about, am I going to be able to afford the health care, then their well-being, one could say, tends to go down. And so this is not something unique to Colorado Springs either. So then I kept looking, and we came across conservatism versus liberal. And what was interesting, this is a study that came out, some preliminary work came out in March. It has not been released yet, or if it has, I didn't see it. So it'll be interesting to follow up with it and understand more of the nuances. But it does show that, kind of at the bottom of the list, or the most liberal communities, are no surprise in that they include Boston, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, and cities of that nature. On the top end of the list, where the most conservative communities, there are only a handful of them, which was fascinating to me. And those, and Colorado Springs ranks fourth, the fourth most conservative community in the nation. And so we have Mesa, Arizona leading the way, Oklahoma City, Virginia Beach, Colorado Springs, Jacksonville, Arlington, Anaheim, Omaha, Tulsa, Aurora, Colorado, Anchorage. And those are the only cities in this particular scale or this particular research that went into the conservative realm. And this is another source of information we looked at and kind of sort of cross-tab these two things comes from NerdWallet. Now, I'm sure everybody's familiar with NerdWallet, right? To the best of my knowledge, NerdWallet is sort of a financial advisory, asset management, wealth advising for tech people, for people in the high-tech realm. And this is the best cities in terms of the quality of life, and Colorado Springs ranks 20th, which again would put us in the top 10% here in terms of quality of life. What was also interesting is that all but Mesa, Arizona, so all of those conservative cities also made the top 100. Okay? And so that was, and the elements there that are considered include the median annual rent as a percentage of median income, percent population with health insurance, unemployment rates, and people with income below the poverty level, so they use their own aspects that are available from the Census Bureau. Some other rankings of Colorado Springs, we see on the personal level, personal well-being, we rank very high. Great, that was a great piece of news last 6 months or whatever with Garden of the Gods. #1 park in the nation, #2 in the world. Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, 5th best zoo in the country. #5 for family fun and activities. On the economic side, the Kauffman Foundation ranks Colorado Springs the top small business friendly community, something that some might disagree with. The second best city to be a tech worker by Smart Asset. So another great piece of information, and 29th best place for business and careers. I thought I'd take a quick look at this issue of not attracting young people, and really the data shows that people between the age of 20 and 30 are the #1 group of people that we attract, at least between 2000 and 2010. And in fact, if you go back in time, that's also consistent. And a lot of that is because of the military presence, no doubt. but it's also because of, if you look at Teller County on the right, they have the opposite effect. They have very few people attracted in their age 20 to 30, and we see that pattern throughout the entire southern part of Colorado. So more rural communities, including Pueblo, have this huge outmigration of people in their 20s and 30, or 20 to 30. You know, and it makes sense in that they're going to college, they're going to find a job, the job market may not be great for entry where they are, and so there is a natural pattern to migrate out of your community into a larger job market to go to school. And we certainly see that anecdotally with a lot of friends and family that I have here in Colorado Springs, moving up to Denver or going off in the world. Hopefully they come back. Finally, sort of wrapping it up, possible elements of the parable. And I think certainly in the top left, the green type, we have defense and aerospace, information technology. Those are our two strongest sectors without a doubt. And then we have the Denver and Front Range megapolitan area that we are attached to. We have, I think, my own bias here, cutting edge government. Not that we have it, but we need to get it. And so I think we ought to make that part of our parable. Education, entrepreneurship, demand-driven labor force. Those are other important elements that I think show up. Probably the most public image or most external image I think we have for Colorado and Colorado Springs: tourism, health, wellness, sports, adventure, outdoors, Pikes Peak in Colorado, and then arts and entertainment to go along with that. And finally, while we attract a lot of young people in their 20s, 20 to 30, we really are, I think, are more known as a family, retirement, and military community. So trying to take that and come up with some direction or my own opinion on this, I tend to relate more to branding rather than parables. And so I looked at it, our old brand versus our new brand. Our old brand is conservative. We have a military element, we have a libertarian element, we have the baby boomers, and the new kind of interesting brand or possibilities, and this is not exhaustive by any means, is the quality of life, high quality of life, definitely in the top 20%. Entrepreneurship, opportunity, excellence in the millennial generation. And so the challenge in any branding exercise is how do you move from the old to the new? And with companies, you can always just shut down the company, right? Well, we don't have that opportunity here. So we have to somehow merge the two. And how do we merge the two to come up with a strong, positive parable? And so the answer for me to that is this on the right-hand side. This is a success formula that I discovered many years ago after being a young guy and thinking that success meant one thing, and that was achieving the goal, and finding out that was not success, that you also have to maintain relationships in the process and have processes that are reasonably and appropriately transparent. So, and as I look at it, what we stand for as a nation, in a pluralistic society, trying to appeal to a wide range of people, the formula should be nonpartisan, providing for both personal, religious, and secular views, people to express whatever they want, find a broad-based middle ground as possible to enhance individual freedom, community well-being, and economic growth. So that's the data and my take on who owns the community parable or what the community parable might be. I do believe that we need to redevelop our parable or be clear on what that parable is, and that it needs to come from a positive place.
If our panelists could come up.